This is José Doofenshmirtz, grandson of the devious Dr. Jekyll, grandfather of Heinz Doofenshmirtz, yet somehow the only member of the Doofenshmirtz family who's Latino. As it turns out, several clues scattered throughout the show hint at a deeper mystery that explains his connection to the Doofenshmirtz lineage and his Latino heritage at the same time. On top of that, today I'll also prove to you guys that Dr. Doofenshmirtz himself is actually related to one of Phineas and Ferb's closest friends. Before we dive into it though, you can share your guess in the comments about who you think it could be. But honestly, it's pretty obvious, I'm not gonna lie. This is a story about seduction, cheating, kidnappings, and apparently corn and meatloaf as well. This is the Grandpa Doofenshmirtz theory. But let's proceed one step at a time, shall we? So, our first instinct would probably be to simply assume Jose was adopted, and although that would be an extremely convenient answer for us all, as the video would end right here, how can he be adopted if he looks exactly like the ancestors of the Doofenshmirtz family, including his own grandpa, Jekyll? Plus, the matter gets all the more confusing if you factor in how Jose's son, aka Doof's father, doesn't look Latino in the slightest. You see, every single time Heinz brought up his grandpa, he cared to point out that there was a weird story surrounding him, although one he never actually revealed. So why would he call it a weird story if Jose was simply adopted? Even though we could assume adoption wasn't extremely common in the early 1900s in Jerusalem, which is admittedly a pretty weird and backward country, it still doesn't seem that weird of a story given Doof's times. So to shed some light on this mystery, we should probably work our way up the Doofenshmirtz family tree and mention Jose's parents and their problematic marriage. We know that Jose's supposed mother, Gretel, was famous for her meatloaf recipe containing the secret ingredient of hate, which she passed down for generations. She gave it to Jose, who handed it to his daughter-in-law, who gave it to Roger, only for Heinz to steal it from him. However, strangely enough, the day she passed it down to Jose, the woman looked extremely mad and resentful as she shot daggers at her son. She wanted her anger not only to be visible, but also to be remembered for the years to come in the commemorative photo taken that day. So what was up with this woman?
Great-Grandma Gretel had some issues.
She had issues, alright. She didn't seem to like her son in the slightest and had so much hate within her. But what's the reason for all this? Well, here's where Jose's father takes the stage. You should probably know that this man is an extremely mysterious character since he's the only member of the Doofenshmirtz family Heinz never talked to us about. We know about Doof's parents, about his grandpa Jose, his great-grandma Gretel, and even his great-great-grandpa Jekyll, but he never once mentioned Jose's father. There seems to be a missing piece of the puzzle right here. Perhaps Doof can help us out here, but we can figure it out ourselves. You see, according to the many time shift episodes the show has given us, there are two Doofenshmirtzes who were alive around the early 1900s and who could be valid candidates for the role of Jose's father. The first one is Professor von Doofenshmirtz from the episode Steampunks, who, however, not only has a slightly different last name than Jose, and presumably only has one daughter, but he was also never seen interacting with any Latin American characters. Not to mention, he seems to have disappeared in 1903 after he blew up, and he only hit the ground again a whole century later in the 2000s. Don't ask me how this works, however, this means that throughout most of his life on this earth, he wasn't even physically on the earth, so we can easily rule him out. The second candidate, and the only other Doofenshmirtz we know from that time period, is a certain doctor who first appeared in the episode Phineas and Ferb and the Temple of Watchadun. And here's where things get interesting. In this episode, we're introduced to a pair of archaeologists, Ohio Flynn and Rhode Island Fletcher, who are searching for the lost temple of Watchadoon while trying to beat their arch-nemesis to it. We're talking about a villainous doctor who plans to take control of the corn colossus of Watchadoon and use its supernatural powers to rule the world. He's none other than Dr. Texas Doofenshmirtz. Well, he's actually just called Doctor Doofenshmirtz, just like his present-time counterpart, but for the sake of this video and for the sake of clarity, I'm giving him a slightly different name to avoid confusion. And since Phineas and Ferb's alter egos are named after American states, as a reference to Indiana Jones, he is now Texas Doofenshmirtz. Deal with it. During their mission, Ohio and Rhode Island are helped by Isabella Garcia Shapiro, a certified damsel in distress, femme fatale, amateur archaeologist, and licensed tile and grout installer. Again, she's another character who shares the same name as her present-day alter ego, so I'm rebranding her as Montana Garcia Shapiro, because New Mexico sounded a little racist. To everyone's surprise though, once the gang gets to the temple, it's revealed that Montana is also a dirty double-crosser, as she got close to Ohio and Rhode Island only to steal their amulet and hand it to Texas. That's not because she's evil or anything, but because the guy had kidnapped her mother and taken her hostage, so the little girl was forced to bend her morals to free her mom, New Hampshire Garcia Shapiro. And she's way more important than you would expect. I'll just lay it on the line. Texas Doofenshmirtz is extremely wicked and competent. He's capable of stealing, kidnapping, ransoming, and even blackmailing someone, so it's not hard to imagine him taking things further and having a relationship with another woman as well, right? Cheating on his wife, Gretel, isn't quite below him. What am I getting at? Well, what if Texas Doofenshmirtz had an affair while in Panama and knocked up New Hampshire Garcia Shapiro only for her to give birth to Jose 9 months later? I mean, the timeline would make complete sense if you think about it. We're in 1914, so Jose's birth would be set sometime in 1915, and since Heinz himself was born between the 60s and the 70s, Jose could totally be Heinz's grandpa and the son of Texas at the same time. Also, all this would work with the characters the show has told us about without bringing in some new character we never heard of. And before we take things further, I want us to be on the same page here. I'm talking about a perfectly consensual relationship between those two, as despite kidnapping her, it seems to me that New Hampshire had absolutely nothing against Texas. Actually, you've heard of Stockholm Syndrome, haven't you? It's a psychological condition of a victim who identifies and empathizes with their captor and their goals. Or in other words, the hostage develops a bond and feelings for their captor. And I believe this is the case. If you notice, New Hampshire didn't look mad at Texas in the slightest for kidnapping and trapping her. She wasn't bothered one bit by his actions, and she didn't even glare at him when the guy pushed her daughter into the pit with her. She doesn't even protest because she has feelings for Texas and is infatuated with him. This seems all the more likely if we keep in mind how New Hampshire is later seen pretty much flirting with Baljeet's alter ego once he comes to rescue the gang from the crumbling temple. Clearly, she falls for people pretty darn easily, so I don't see why she wouldn't fall for a very charismatic and charming man like Texas. And the guy, as we said, wouldn't think twice about cheating on Gretel. Not only would this relationship explain Jose's Latin American origins and why he still looks just like the Doofenshmirtz ancestors, but it would also shed some light on Gretel's hatred and her profound issues. Plus, this way, Jose's son, aka Doof's father, would only be 1/4 Mexican, which would explain why he doesn't really look Latino. So back to our family tree, we lose Gretel and replace her with New Hampshire, which of course makes Jose and Montana brother and sister, or to be more precise, half siblings, which in turn would make Montana's daughter, presumably Nana Shapiro, and Jose's son, Mr. Doofenshmirtz, cousins, meaning their respective children, Heinz and Isabella's mom, are second cousins. And consequently, of course, this makes Vanessa and Isabella third cousins, I guess. Which may not seem like much, but if Heinz and Vivian are second cousins, they're not really distant relatives, especially by the standards of a close-knit Latin American family. So once Gretel learned about the affair and the son born from Texas and New Hampshire, she just lost it. The issues Doof talked about were with her cheating husband and his son, and the great hate that made her meatloaf so special was directed at them. Over time, Gretel cultivated her hatred and resentment only to redirect them into her cooking, eventually resulting in her famous meatloaf. But when the time came to pass down her recipe, because José was the only heir of the Doofenshmirtz family, and possibly because Texas likely made her do it, Gretel was forced to give it to José. However, since the woman wanted her hate to be remembered through the years so that her suffering would never be forgotten, she had a photograph taken, resulting in the weird story about José that Heinz mentioned time and time again. But we could look even deeper into this whole story, as it would also explain the gradual decline in evil tendencies across generations in the Doofenshmirtz family. In fact, as you can see, present-day Doofenshmirtzes are not as evil as their ancestors. We go from Doof's father, who was a horrible parent, but not an evil person per se, he never hurt anyone else other than his son, to Heinz, who, on multiple occasions, proved he's incapable of doing something truly evil, and his brother Roger, who's an ass, but certainly not evil, and finally to Doof's daughter Vanessa, who's a good person through and through. No Doofenshmirtz after Texas ever longed for world domination or even sought power the way these guys did. So it's clear there's a pattern. The evil greatly decreased over the generations, either because the Garcia Shapiro genes counteracted the evil ones of the Doof dynasty, or if we don't want to believe evil is in some way hereditary, the Garcia Shapiro family simply left a positive impact and influence on the Doofenshmirtzes, changing them for the better, making them drop their thirst for world domination, and ultimately making them lose their edge. But hey, this is just a theory, a Phineas and Ferb theory. And cut. Let me know your thoughts on the theory, and let me know if you can think of some more evidence that could support it. As usual, if you have a Phineas and Ferb theory of your own, go ahead and share it. And lastly, check out my old ones in case you haven't already. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!